Hello, welcome back everyone to your number one Google Slides live stream in Santa Cruz County, coming at you once again from Rockingham Township, Vermont. Now, this week I'm feeling a little less shellfish than last week. And that means that today's talk is only going to be about half about shellfish, or even less. It's mostly about human beings, which you may find more interesting or perhaps even more disturbing to look at. Now, normally oysters and human beings are not all that connected, at least not obviously connected, but that's the magic of Pliny the Elder and his natural history. Nature doesn't repeat, it's full of unique things, so these things always rhyme in the world of the natural history. And I want to start just by saying, what is a Pliny? What is a Pliny? Because I'm going to be talking about Pliny a lot this quarter. It's something that I'm working on. Pliny the Elder is not just a beer, but also an author, a Roman author, living in the 1st century CE. And I want to be real exact about the pronunciation, just in case any of you are bartenders, because bartenders correct me on this all the time, and I should put correct in air quotes there. The correct way to pronounce the dude's name is Pliny, like Latin Plinius, not Pliny. Makes you sound like a yokel. Okay, now, like the beer, Pliny does come in two flavors. There's Pliny the Elder and Pliny the Younger. Pliny the Elder is the one that I care about. I could really take or leave Pliny the Younger. I actually prefer to leave Pliny the Younger. I think he kind of sucks. Pliny the Elder, though, Pliny the Elder wrote one big book, one really interesting big book, and that is called The Natural History, here portrayed in all of its volubish glory. You can count the volumes there. There are a lot of them. It's a big book. He wrote other big books as well, but they didn't survive. So The Natural History is the book that we know him for. And natural history, what that means in this case is that it's kind of an encyclopedia. It's a narrative about all of the stuff that is in nature, a historia, or an investigation of all the stuff that's in nature, a historia naturalis. And that comes in for a bit of attention in these broadcasts, which are supposed to be about things that are kind of marginal and unteachable, because everybody thinks it sucks shit, basically, is the problem. People hate Pliny. Classicists hate Pliny. Even people who read Latin for fun hate Pliny because, first, the prose style in which he writes is generally been regarded as just execrable. Edward Norton, who's a German, who's like the main prose critic from like the 19th century, said Pliny's prose style is actually the worst that we have. Die schlechteste, the worst prose style in Latin. A verdict which a lot of people have kind of had repeated since then. Second, the content, because it's an encyclopedia about nature, people assume the content's hella boring, so they don't really want to get into it. And the people who do get into the content, people who are really interested in, like, I don't know, what forms of corundum the Romans knew about, or other kinds of rocks that they were into, people who are into that stuff, read this encyclopedia and they're like, what Pliny is adding is just all of this tiresome lecturing. So Pliny takes a boring content and makes it worse, people think. Obviously, this isn't my view, or I wouldn't be working on the guy. I think there's this interesting tension between what should be a really boring content and a style that makes that content come alive. You got to talk about everything if you're writing an encyclopedia. And everything includes a lot of really boring stuff, including rocks, not even the cool rocks. So Pliny's style, his way of working in anecdotes, humorous stuff, moralizing sermons. It's true he does get a bit lectury. Adds a lot. And his way of arranging the material, particularly the way that he cross-references between things, the way he points out these rhymes in nature, is also really interesting. So our expectation in a kind of encyclopedia like this is that there's going to be this kind of hierarchical arrangement, a taxonomy, everything's going to be put into categories and boxes and pigeonholes, etc. And there is that dimension to the organization of the natural history, but the cross-references, the rhymes and echoes, are always undermining that taxonomy. They're always cutting across it. And one of those is what I'm on about today. So I talked last week about Greco-Roman view of oysters as an animal that just has a great time, an animal that has fun, that experiences pleasure and pain but nothing else, has no mind to speak of beyond that. So it's alive, but perhaps not meaningfully alive. And I talked about how the oyster is a figure for human hedonism in philosophical traditions, starting with Plato's Philebus. I also talked about how pearls make that allegory kind of literal. Pearls come from oysters. They're an element of luxury consumption, and luxury in Latin is also a word for lust. So that this kind of hedonistic indulgence that the oyster provides for us, and it's a way of the oyster kind of striking back, right? We declare the oyster to be a hedonist, and the oyster gets back at us by driving us crazy with pearls. And Pliny came up in that kind of account because he has a lot to say about pearl. We're going to go a bit more into depth in what follows. Speaking of pearls, what makes a pearl nice? Right? I don't know if this is something that